The war in Ukraine has passed its 4-year mark, cementing itself as the bloodiest, most industrialized conflict Europe has witnessed since 1945. For decades, military doctrine dictated that the ultimate arbiter of land dominance was the main battle tank. Yet on the modern saturated battlefield, heavy armor has faced an existential crisis. Russia has lost over 4,400 tanks, destroyed, abandoned, or captured. Independent military analysts estimate the true attrition rate sits closer to 6,000 or even 8,000 units. Yet a paradox emerges. Satellite reconnaissance indicates that Moscow is actively churning out replacements at an unprecedented industrial pace. On paper, the Kremlin may soon field more active tanks than it possessed prior to February 2022. But this growing armored fleet hides a fatal flaw. While Russia has successfully resurrected its mechanized mass, Ukraine has fundamentally rewritten the rules of engagement. In doing so, Kyiv has transformed the legendary Russian armored juggernaut into a multi-million-dollar liability. Today, we analyze the structural reality behind Russia's rebuilt tank force and why this new Iron Army might be dead on arrival. To comprehend how Russia replaced thousands of lost vehicles, we must look not to cutting-edge assembly lines, but to the vast, decaying storage depots of the Soviet era. In early 2022, the International Institute for Strategic Studies estimated Russia's active standing fleet at 3,000 tanks with an additional 9,000 in reserve. In the first 13 months of fighting alone, over half of that active standing force vanished. No modern army can sustain such a catastrophic rate of hardware depletion without total operational collapse. The Kremlin's primary manufacturing hub, Uralvagonzavod, can produce at most 250 modernized T-90M tanks per year from scratch. The Omsk Transmash plant can refurbish roughly 150 T-80 BVMs. Combine this total output of 400 tanks annually falls critically short against an ongoing attrition rate averaging 85 to 100 tanks per month. Faced with the devastating deficit, Russia turned its military-industrial complex into an archaeological excavation. Industrial facilities began dragging 50-year-old T-72As and T-62S out of Siberian boneyards. However, resurrecting long-abandoned hulls created an acute logistical and engineering bottleneck: dead propulsion systems. By late 2024, the State Defense Committee admitted that thousands of stored tanks had entirely degraded power plants. In response, Russia launched an emergency engine regeneration program tasking the Kingisepp machine-building plant with completely stripping and rebuilding obsolete Soviet-era engines with modern internal components. While this industrial effort successfully mated 1970s hulls with upgraded optics radios and explosive reactive armor, it introduced a deep tactical compromise. These hybrid platforms, while numerous, lack the structural survivability and reverse gear speed necessary to survive high-intensity modern maneuvers. To understand the operational capability of this rebuilt force, we must analyze its specific composition. First, the workhorse, the T-72 series. Designed in the early 1970s to be the armored equivalent of the AK-47 cheap, rugged, and easily mass-produced, the T-72 remains the most dominant tank on the battlefield. Yet it is also the most vulnerable. Visually confirmed losses of the T-72 exceed 1,800 units. Second, the gas turbine-powered T-80, celebrated for its high mobility and silent approach, it has been ground down relentlessly. By 2025, analytical data suggested Russia had committed nearly 90% of its deployable T-80 variants, forcing crews to dub the vehicle a steel coffin due to its catastrophic rate of immediate turret separation upon impact. At the apex sits the T-90M Proryev, the crown jewel of Russian armor. Featuring advanced fire control, Kalina combat systems, and Relict reactive armor, it represents Russia's closest equivalent to Western standards. Yet of the estimated 220 T-90 variants lost, over 150 are the advanced T-90M model, meaning Russia has lost far more T-90Ms than it even possessed at the onset of the war. When even these reserves grew thin, the Kremlin crossed an alarming threshold, deploying T-62s and T-55s platforms engineered in the immediate aftermath of World War II. While a 100mm rifled gun can still deliver devastating direct and indirect fire, these museum pieces lack the basic armor geometry and thermal imaging suites required to survive contemporary anti-tank guided missiles. This deliberate trade-off highlights a doctrinal shift from quality to raw, unadulterated quantity. No analysis of Russian armor is complete without addressing the T-14 Armata. Introduced during the 2015 Victory Day parade, the Armata was heralded as a revolutionary next-generation leap. It featured an unmanned turret, a highly protected armored crew capsule, and an active protection system designed to intercept incoming projectiles. Yet, in the largest tank confrontation of the 21st century, the T-14 has been entirely absent from offensive operations. Aside from a brief deployment in 2023, where it was utilized strictly as long-range indirect artillery in rear sectors, it was promptly withdrawn. State officials blamed exorbitant unit costs ranging between $5 to $9 million, arguing it was more economically viable to refurbish thousands of older T-72s. However, from a military doctrine standpoint, the Armata is not merely a financial failure. It is a victim of a shifting technological paradigm. In an era where a $1,000 loitering munition can permanently disable a multi-million-dollar asset, investing concentrated capital into a singular complex land platform is tactically unviable. The Armata became an evolutionary dead end because the battlefield evolved faster than its procurement cycle. Why did this massive fleet of Soviet-engineered platforms fail so catastrophically? The explanation lies in three distinct structural layers. The first layer is engineering vulnerability, famously known as the jack-in-the-box effect. Soviet designers chose to eliminate the fourth crew member by utilizing an automatic carousel ammunition loader located directly beneath the turret floor. This allowed the tank to maintain a low profile and reduced weight, making it highly transportable by rail. However, it placed the crew directly on top of highly volatile propellant charges. When an enemy projectile penetrates the hull, it triggers a sympathetic detonation, instantly vaporizing the interior and throwing the multi-ton turret dozens of feet into the air. Conversely, Western platforms like the American M1 Abrams store ammunition in a reinforced rear turret bustle equipped with blowout panels, directing the blast energy outward and ensuring crew survivability. The second layer is operational and doctrinal misuse. During the initial push toward Kyiv, Russia deployed dense, unsupported armored columns along highly predictable highway axes. These formations lacked two critical components: robust logistical supply lines and sufficient screening infantry. A main battle tank is fundamentally blind and deaf within enclosed urban or heavily forested terrain. Without dismounted infantry to flush out ambushes, these multi-ton vehicles were systematically picked apart by light mobile Ukrainian hunter-killer teams utilizing modern anti-tank weapons like the Javelin and NLAW. The third layer is the complete democratization of precision air power through first-person view FPV drones. By 2025, independent assessments attributed up to 65% of all Russian tank losses directly to loitering munitions. Ukraine's decentralized defense industry scaled production to an astonishing volume, utilizing garage startups and large factories alike to flood the front line with cheap, explosive-laden quadcopters. The sky turned into a permanent, omnipresent surveillance and strike network, rendering traditional stealth or speed irrelevant. What is the ultimate strategic objective for this reconstructed yet vulnerable horde of armor? One prevailing theory suggests the Kremlin is playing a protracted war of attrition. Russian high command may be preserving its armored core in the anticipation of a breakthrough in electronic warfare or directed energy interception technology that could clear the skies of low-cost drones, thereby reopening the battlefield for rapid mechanized exploitation. A darker, more immediate reality is that these tanks are viewed simply as expendable mobile artillery pieces, sacrificial steel deployed to sustain grueling operational pressure at a massive rate of exchange. However, this strategy faces an absolute mathematical deadline. Russia's reliance on its inherited Soviet stockpiles is a finite, non-repeatable industrial subsidy. High-resolution satellite imagery analyzed in mid-2026 reveals that out of the original 7,342 tanks visible in pre-war depots, only about 2,000 remain. Crucially, less than 900 of those remaining hulls are in a physical state viable for restoration. The rest are rusted, stripped, and entirely unrecoverable. At the current consumption rate, Russia is on track to completely exhaust its viable Cold War armor reserves within the next 9 to 12 months. When that threshold is crossed, Moscow will be forced to rely exclusively on new factory production, triggering a drastic drop in total operational mass. The era of overwhelming Soviet armored numbers is rapidly drawing to a permanent close. For more deep dive military analysis into the changing face of modern warfare, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave your thoughts on the future of heavy armor in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next briefing.